In 2017, James Donaldson, better known as MrBeast, started posting videos on YouTube. What began as simple challenge videos soon transformed into a global empire of philanthropy, extravagant giveaways, and larger-than-life stunts. He became YouTube's biggest creator, celebrated for its generosity and ambition. But in 2022, the picture changed. Accusations surfaced, claims of a toxic workplace, mistreatments, and lawsuits from contestants. The internet debated, headlines emerged, but something fascinating happened. His fans didn't abandon him. In fact, many doubled down, defending him even more fiercely. Supporters dismissed the claims, calling them jealousy-fueled or fake news. Some refused to even read the allegations, convinced that their hero couldn't possibly be wrong. This isn't just about one creator. It is how we as humans deal with uncomfortable truths. Today we're diving into the psychology of belief change, and more often than not, its complete lack. Why do we defend people we admire, even when faced with evidence against them? And more importantly, how do we think critically, even when the truth is inconvenient? My name is Kevin, and I have too many interests, not enough time, and a drive to understand the world better. Imagine that you have been hyping a movie for months. You looked at the trailer, it looked amazing, the reviews were good, and you convinced all of your friends to go and watch it together. Then you finally watch it, and it's terrible. It's bad acting, bad plot, everything sucked. At this point, you have two choices. First, you admit that it was a bad movie, and the second one is you're gonna say, well, it was not that bad, people don't really got it, it's something special. And surprisingly, a lot of people go with option 2. Why? Because admitting that it sucked means that you need to face the fact that you wasted your money, you wasted your time, and you wasted your energy, your enthusiasm. And that is an uncomfortable feeling, and it's called cognitive dissonance. Instead of accepting reality, your brain works overtime to protect you from regret. The more invested you were, the harder it is to change your mind. For example, it's easy to laugh at flat earthers, but they're a perfect case of cognitive dissonance. Many of them simply started by questioning NASA, and when they were faced with evidence that didn't confirm their beliefs, they dug deeper rather than admitting that they were wrong. Why? Because admitting that they were wrong would mean that they admit also that they spent years digging into this topic and arguing online and maybe even losing friends over it. And that's a lot to swallow. Now, here's where things get even weirder. Sometimes when people are faced with facts that contradict their beliefs, they often don't just resist it, but they also become more convinced that they were right. And that's called the Backfire Effect. Imagine someone spent years following a health guru who claims that eating raw food cures cancer. Then a massive study goes out and it proves that it just doesn't. And instead of reconsidering their beliefs, they will say that the study was biased, or that the scientists are corrupt, or that big pharma is hiding the real cure. And that is not just stubbornness, it's really the brain going into self-defense mode. But here's the twist. New research suggests that the backfire effect doesn't really apply universally, because that would mean that we never change our mind. And some studies showed that when you show enough evidence and you repeat the exposure, slowly people start changing their minds. This means that adjusting our views isn't impossible. It just takes more than one conversation. Take smoking. In the 50s, the tobacco industry managed to convince people that smoking was harmless, even after research linked smoking with lung cancer. So at the start, some claiming that the study was flawed, or that my grandpa lived until 90 and he smoked 2 packs a day. But over time, repeated exposure to scientific research and anti-smoking campaigns, people started to change their beliefs. And today, the vast majority of the population accepts that there is a link between lung cancer and smoking. So that shows that even though we sometimes resist new information, with repeated exposure and good arguments, we at some point start to change our mind, even on deeply held beliefs. And this is where things get interesting, because sometimes it happens to a group of people, not only an individual. Have you ever been completely sure of something only to realize later that you just remembered it wrong? And yes, you're not the only one, because that's called the Mandela Effect. It's when a large group of people all remember the same thing, even though that never happened. A shocking number of people swear that they remember that in the 90s, there was a movie called Shazam, starring comedian Sinbad as the genie. They really remember the VHS cover, some scenes, and how the movie ended. But here's the catch. This movie never existed. If you're one of these people, let me know in the comments and we'll see how many people are affected by this Mandela effect. And instead of admitting that their memory failed, some people are coming up with crazy explanations such as, well, it must have happened in an alternate universe or something.
The man does not exist, okay? So I decided, oh shit, buddy, I gotta dig a little deeper.
That's of course another way that our brain is protecting us from being wrong. Yes, we would rather have a parallel universe rather than admitting that we're wrong. Now, it's not the same as the Backfire effect, but it's very connected to it because it shows really how much our brain is trying to avoid the humiliation of facing the limitation of our reasoning. Our mind just do whatever it takes to try to avoid this cognitive discomfort. If cognitive dissonance is the problem, then the strategy to escape it is called motivated reasoning. We don't just reject the evidence, we actively search for reason to dismiss it. In the 60s, the sugar industry paid researchers in order to show that the heart problems, they don't really come from sugar, but from fat. And as a result, we got decades of misinformation on health and diet. And when new studies came showing that sugar had actually a huge impact on our health, people just dismissed it because of the old refrain, fat is the enemy. And that's because they spent years avoiding butter and eating low-fat, high-sugar diets. And who wants to admit that they're wrong on something as fundamental as what we're eating every day? Beliefs aren't just thoughts, they're really connected to the identity. And when you challenge someone's identity, you're basically telling them you've been living a lie. That's hard to hear no matter how smart you are. Elizabeth Holmes convinced some of the most powerful people that her company, Theranos, was revolutioning the blood testing technology. Even as the evidence of fraud started to pile up, the investors and the supporters, they didn't just abandon ship directly. Because if they would do so, that would mean that they had bad judgment in the first place. And that really hurts. People will defend a belief long past the point where it makes sense, because they don't want to feel like they have been fooled. So how do we escape those mental traps? I have 5 tips that hopefully will help you stop those cognitive biases from running your life. 1, the cognitive dissonance check. We all know that there is a specific feeling when we're faced with some good arguments from someone else and we need to reconsider our beliefs. So when you feel that, ask yourself, am I just dismissing this argument because it makes me uncomfortable, or do I have good reasons for it? The faster you recognize dissonance, the easier it is to correct it. 2, the reverse fact check trick. Often when we're confronted with a claim, we directly wonder why it's false. But we can force ourselves to simply wonder, why would it be right? And starting to try supporting the claim. And that forces your brain to engage with opposing ideas, which automatically will try to run away from. 3, the identity-free thought experiment. Try thinking about your beliefs as if they weren't yours. That means if you were the opposing side, what would you actually say? And hopefully that reduces a bit the emotional attachments that we have on the beliefs, and that helps to solve this dissonance. 4, the Theranos test for new ideas. Ask yourself, if this belief turned out to be false, what would be the consequence? And if the answer is, well, I would lose money or identity or reputation, then you're probably motivated to keep this belief. 5, and this is my favorite one, be okay with saying, I don't know. Nobody is expecting you to have an answer for everything. And I really, really believe that the strongest thinkers are the ones who admit that they're still learning. Nowadays, with people pretending to be an expert on absolutely everything, I don't know is the most powerful thing you can say, in my opinion. So next time you catch yourself rejecting a fact a bit too quickly, ask yourself, am I just protecting my identity, or am I actually seeking the truth? In the next episode, we will ask ourselves what is actually critical thinking, because I've been using this term a lot in my channel, but I never really pointed to what actually we're talking about. So that's gonna be fun. See you on the next one.